guys, welcome to the Sportscast. This is the Tyler Turner Show. Today's date, January 18th, 2021. Please check us out on the sportscast.net. Also check us out on Twitter, Sportscast1. Check us out on Periscope. Check us out on YouTube. Also check us out on iTunes and leave us a review. Hi guys, today I have, last week, first, I got all this stuff in front of me. Last week I did not do a show, and the reason why was because there was this thing called the National Championship game in college football. I thought it probably wasn't the best night to do a show because I didn't think anyone would be listening. I also didn't think I didn't have a national. Wasn't we doing looking at the game? I wasn't gonna miss the game. I probably could have missed the game. It was not what I thought it was going to be. I thought Ohio State was going to be better than that. Granted, Alabama was a great team. They're just terrific. I think 2 straight years you've seen 2 teams in LSU in 2019, 2020 championship, and then Alabama 2020 with the 2021 championship. You just saw 2 teams that were just very good offensively, good defensively, great quarterback play, just prolific receivers. That brings up a point. You can have big-time receivers these days in college football. Back in the day, it was like, man, you need the guys in the trenches. You need to have the defense wins championships. You need the guys that can get off the pass rusher. I mean, and you still do need all those things. But, man, if you can have some guys like a Devontae Smith, like a Jamar Chase, Jordan Jefferson, some of the guys that have come through college football the last 2 years, if you can have those dudes making plays, it's kind of tough to beat them. And then now that being said, USC's had great receivers for a decade plus, and they've not really been very good because they've been struggling in every other aspect in mainly coaching. Sorry, there's a little phone. What is that? Hold on 1 second. Get my dishwasher running in my house, and then too much noise. Anyways. Back to what I was talking about. It was just not if you're an Alabama fan, it was a great game. Was it 52-24? I'm trying to remember the score offhand. Ohio State defensively couldn't stop them. Offensively, they were just not consistent at moving the ball, had trouble running on a consistent basis. Justin Fields did not have his best game. And to be honest with you, when I look at Justin Fields' career in college football, he was a ballyhoo guy just like Trevor Lawrence. Number 1 player, Trevor Lawrence. Number 2 player, Justin Fields. And there's a lot I like about Justin Fields. I think he's a good kid. He's a great athlete. He has a great arm. He's good size. He has all the physical intangibles. But his college career, Georgia, didn't play a ton. But when he did play, I didn't think he was very consistent. But he wasn't used that great. So I was like, okay. So then his sophomore year, he looked great most of the year. But towards the end of the year, I know he got injured, but didn't think he was playing that good against Penn State, or was it Michigan that he got injured? I forgot. I think it was Michigan. Didn't play that great against Penn State. I think he had a pretty good game against Michigan, but then he got injured. Wasn't very good against Wisconsin. I know he was injured, but then he also wasn't good against Clemson. He had at the end of the game, he was the one that threw the interception. And this year, I know it was a wonky COVID season, and I know that, it was tough for teams to really be on point, especially with the stops and starts. But, no, he wasn't very good against Indiana, 3 interceptions. He wasn't very good against Northwestern, a couple interceptions in the first half. And he wasn't very good against Alabama. Great performance against Clemson. I mean, he had a great performance against Penn State earlier in the year. But as a whole, he was a little – consistency is something that when he's going off to the NFL after 3 collegiate seasons, and I would say NFL teams probably are a little bit concerned about the overall consistency of his play. And, so last year, the whole draft season, I was really in the draft season probably more than any other year because Oregon Ducks had Justin Herbert. And I had to hear about Justin Herbert and how his play regressed. And I was like, man, sometimes maybe you just kind of got to go with when the guy is 6'6", 240 pounds, has a rocket arm, is a good athlete, is a good student. Maybe you have to say, maybe he just needs better coaching. Maybe he just needs a better team. Maybe he just needs another better system for his abilities. Maybe you just have to say, when a guy has that many other good things, he's smart, he's big, he's a good arm, he's a good athlete. Maybe it's just one of those things that you just got to say, the tape does show some inconsistency. There's some things to worry about there, but he has so much other intangibles. He also looked great at the combine. He looked great at his senior day, looked great at his pro day. High character guy. So no red flags except for an inconsistent film. Well, he ended up going third of the quarterbacks, number 6 player, so still very terrific. What did he do? Justin Herbert broke pretty much every rookie NFL record: touchdowns, completions, yards per play. I think the only thing he didn't get was total yards, and I think he was second all time. But he basically broke every record, NFL Rookie of the Year and all that. And I think moving forwards, I think Herbert will be the best of that class. Burrow still has come off an injury. I like opinion too. I don't have enough time, but I don't think that Tua is limited physically. And I always did. And so that's why when it was between Tua and Herbert, the biggest thing was Tua's injury history. Because everything else, the play, the accuracy, Tua was unquestionably the results, the statistical consistencies. Everyone's like, Tua is a no-brainer. That's what I heard from every prognosticator, from every major sporting and draft prognosticator and site. It's Tua. You have to go Tua unless it's the injury. If you're concerned with the injuries, I understand that. Well, Tua ended up getting drafted ahead. And I'm like, but it's more than that. He's bigger guy, Herbert. Better arm, Herbert. Better athlete, Herbert. The guy, a 4.1 student, a guy with a a 38 Wonderlic score. Tua's was very average when it came to that stuff. So I was like, Herbert actually has every physical intangible, every talent. So, and you have this injury question mark with a guy that's already small, a guy that I think lacked those elite characteristics, those intangibles from a physical perspective: arm strength, athleticism, size, all that. I was like, no, I think that you should go with Herbert. And yeah, I'm an Oregon fan. So, yeah, I'm pushing my boy. But I saw Herbert. I saw his inconsistencies. I saw a guy that was not always on a consistent game-by-game, play-by-play basis, terrific player in college. He wasn't. There was some times where he was just off, and sometimes he would go off for long periods, and it was kind of odd because he had so much else going for him that I to this day can't explain it, because he didn't look like the NFL. I think he had one bad game. I think he had one really poor game against New England. But other than that, the guy was one of the top 10 best quarterbacks in the NFL, the best rookie ever. And he didn't play that great a team. He did bunch of injured old linemen, terrible defense. Coach ends up getting fired. So it wasn't like he played on a great team, but he looked terrific. So I just thought you go with Herbert. I thought he had too many things going over than Tua. And then this year, obviously, who knows what happens. But I was not impressed with Tua. I thought everything that I thought about him. I didn't think he was that great athlete. Didn't look like a great athlete this year. Didn't think he had a great arm. I thought that when things were so open, he was going to struggle because then he wouldn't trust his arm strength. Well, he didn't even throw the ball. He ended up getting benched because he would fail to throw the ball down the field. He was the ultimate game manager on a team that was good. Granted, Miami was good. Now, they need some weapons on offense and then a little bit of offensive line stuff. But overall, that was a much better team. He plays for a much better team than Herbert did, yet looked like considerably worse. But anyways, back to what I'm saying. With Fields, I don't want to do that again. I don't want to go down that road where the guy has so much going for him just because there's some inconsistencies. Now, one caveat: Ohio State was a much better team than Oregon. Oregon is good. They're my team. They're a top 5 team. They won the Rose Bowl. But Ohio State was the second best team in college football. Last year, they were a college football playoff. So he played on a better team. So inconsistency with a better team would raise even a little more concern. He also is not quite is physically, like, he's not as big as Herbert. He also has an injury history. He has a good arm. I don't think he has a kind of elite arm talent of a Herbert. So I don't think he's quite as talented from the quarterback position. And he found the same inconsistency on a better team. Why am I going into this long monologue? Because I maybe would draft Zach Wilson above him. I love Zach Wilson. Now, I didn't play against great competition, but he can throw the ball all over the field from every angle. He's terrific on the run. He is very good anticipation. He's just very skilled to begin with. He lead receivers, anticipation throws across the field, ability to get outside the pocket. He can do it inside the pocket. He's good scrambling ability. He's a good athlete. He's a pretty decent sized guy. I don't think there's a ton, like where Tua is like injury prone and undersized and not a great arm. Zach Wilson has a great arm. He's a good athlete. He's not undersized. The only thing would be competition he played against, and that would probably be the one that caveat that I'd raise in Fields' favor significantly. It'll be an interesting debate, but I think I think Wilson has a better argument going ahead of Fields than Tua did over Herbert. And I know that Tua put up ridiculous numbers, but look at the team he played for. 4 of those wide receivers are going to be first-round draft picks. One of them won a Heisman Trophy. The running back, he played with 2 different first-round running backs. He's played with 3 or 4 first-round offensive linemen. He's played with the most talented roster on paper in college football. I mean, that has to be taken a little bit more seriously. Just saying. BYU hasn't been really any good until Zach Wilson came along. Now, they didn't play against great talent, but against great teams and great talent. But they dominated everyone they played against. Almost beat a very good Coastal Carolina team with 3 days preparation. Remember that. You would have had an undefeated BYU team if that happened. I just think I could see people drafting Wilson above Fields, and I wouldn't have a question. I had more of a question with the Tua over Herbert, despite the fact I know that Herbert, I just thought he had so much more things going from just a physical aspect that I just thought you couldn't take for granted. I mean, and the thing was he didn't have character problems. He was smart. He was a good student. So he had a lot, even off the field stuff that was very good. It was just an inconsistent tape, and I understand that question, but I think they made it. Honestly, I said it then. I got on a couple of podcasts. I just thought up going into the draft, and people bashed Herbert, and I'm like, whatever. He's going to end up being the best quarterback probably of the group. And it's 1 year, but I think he will. I think he is. I think he was a lot more talented even than Joe Burrow. But I understood the Burrow, Cincinnati kid, and super talented guy who had one of the best college football seasons I've ever seen. So I understood Burrow, but I still think Herbert is having a better NFL career. But anyways, long story short, that's my opinion on Justin Fields. I still think he's a top 10 pick. I just maybe would draft Zach Wilson in front of him. Wouldn't be shocked. I like Zach Wilson. He just does a lot. Kind of reminds me of Aaron Rodgers. We'll see. Rodgers playing in that. I'm a Packer fan, by the way. Rodgers playing for the NFC Championship. So not much more to say about that. I guess to mention the Big Ten, because I'm going to touch on like 3 or 4 different subjects. Next, to go on with the Big Ten. It's just the season was what it was. The most games that were played, I believe, I think maybe 1 or 2 teams got 9 games in. I know Penn State did. I believe Rutgers did. But everyone else, it was as low as, I believe, and I'm doing off the top of my head, I believe Maryland got only 5 games in. I know there was 5 to 9 was the range. You had teams as low as 5, as many as 9. Better than the Pac-12. Pac-12 was 4 to 7. So the Big Ten got some more games in. I think the average is maybe like 6 or 7. I forgot what it was. You got a team that got to play for the national title. So that alone was kind of worth it. You got to get your team in the national title game. It's an awesome experience, even if they did lose by a significant margin. Coming back next year, I'm going to do a deep dive. First of all, I'm doing my team talent formula. I'm going to briefly touch on that, and then I'm actually go into it a little bit. Team talent formula is basically I exfoliate the data from recruiting rankings, so whatever their final recruiting ranking is going into college by the 247 composite. I then do this point system. The higher the rated player, the more points. So basically, highest is 6 points, it goes 6, and then 5.5, 5, 4.5, 3.5, 2.5, 1.5, 1, and then 0.75, 0.50, 0.25, 0.10, 0.05. So basically, highest rated guys, 5 stars by far get the most points. Top 50, 4 stars, second highest group of points. Top 100, third. Top 150, top 200, top 250. And then by the time it gets pretty close, when it gets to the 3-star range, obviously the higher the 3-star, the little more their little higher point total I give them. I've changed it up a couple times. I've done it 2 years in a row. I did a team talent formula in 2019. I did a team talent formula in 2020, and now in 21. I've changed it every year. This is my 3rd year. I changed it. I was going to even get more specific and do every number. So if a player had a 99 rating, they're given this much, 98, 97. But I decided it would just take a little too much time. So I do it in a range. So it's like top 50, top 100. And I just go to what normally it is. So if a player's 0.955, that's top 100, 3.5 points for those guys. And I go in ranges. So 93, 94 the same, 91, 92 the same, 89, 90 the same, 87, 88. So on and so forth. Anyways, I'm going to go into the data. I'll probably be able to exfoliate and give you, and I'm going to do that. The reason why I haven't been able to finalize it is there's still more rankings for the 2021 class. There's final rankings by 247 Sports, by ESPN, and by Rivals. And also there's another signing day. It's in 2 weeks from today. No, wait, that's all right. 2 weeks from Wednesday, sorry. 2 weeks from Wednesday, so in 16 days is the final signing day. So there's other guys that are going to sign. I think about 80% have signed, but there's still about 20% of prep and junior college guys to sign. So that is something to look out for. And I'm excited to exfoliate that, and pretty much all the guys have declared for the draft. I think today was the deadline, so you kind of have that information out there. And then you also have the transfer portal. It's just every day there's new people. Oh my goodness. And high rated guys that were top 50, 5 stars that are transferring out of the program. So that's just, it's a daily, just keep an eye on the transfer portal. It's fun to watch. In the Big Ten, Ohio State's going to be the best team from a baseline perspective again. Now I am going to go this year. I'm going to go a little deeper. I just really want to see how good I can know every single team, especially in the Big Ten, the Pac-12. I'm probably not going to deal with the other conferences, but those 2 conferences, how good I can know, what is the returning production on offense? What is the returning production on defense? What is the baseline talent? What is the returning starters on offense and defense, and see how, and what did they rank? If they return all 11 starters, but were the last ranked offense in the Big Ten, then okay, well, you return a lot of guys that weren't very good. So to really go into it, how much talent you're bringing back, how much production you're bringing back, how much talent you have on the roster, and then overall, how good that talent is coming back compared to what its results were in this last year. A little bit more difficult because it's just a weird season. I've done one team so far, and it's Oregon, that I have a good idea of. I've not done anyone. I've done Ohio State a little bit. Ohio State is because they have a lot of talented players, and talented players, well, they get looks by the NFL draft. Ohio State had several guys go to the draft. Justin Fields went to the draft. Nate Myers went to the draft. Wyatt Davis went to the draft. Trey Sermons went to the draft. On defense, Tommy Togiai went to the draft. Barrett Browning went to the draft. Sean Wade went to the draft. And then other guys like Hilliard, Tuff Borland, Pete Werner, guys like that could have come back for an extra year, but they just chose to just exhaust their eligibility and head to the draft. So Ohio State is only bringing back maybe 11. They did get Chris Olave back, which I was shocked about. I thought Chris Olave was going to head to the pros. He was a first-round pick, probably. But he came back. So I don't know. In my opinion, it's his choice. I don't think he's going to improve his draft stock because, one, he's going to be playing with a new quarterback, might not be as good. Chances are it won't be as experienced as Fields. And number two, I think Olave's kind of is what he is. He's a tall, quick, extremely fast wide receiver. I mean, not that tall, sorry. He's kind of like a lean, really lean, kind of a number 2, number 3 guy. A guy that, I could see a Jefferson type of player. Justin Jefferson had a remarkable year, so that's a pretty good comparison. But someone like that, I don't know, like Stephon Diggs, just a guy, a deep threat, get down the field, great hands, good ball skills. So I kind of thought I don't think he's gonna ever, because he's not like an imposing guy from a physical standpoint, like size, and just a guy that you would think being like a top pick, and he's good speed, but he's not like a blazer. But you don't have to be a blazer. You look at Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith; they're not, and you look how successful they are. But I don't know if he's going to go that much higher. But whatever, he's coming back. But anyways, Ohio State returns like 11 or 12 guys, which isn't great. And normally when you return that's not because they're great, but Ohio State reloads like no one else. They had the number 2 class this cycle. They had the number 5 class last cycle. They are going to probably – I haven't done the baseline, but I believe Ohio State's probably going to be about 3rd when it comes to baseline talent for rosters across college football. And the unquestioned number 1 is just going to be young. They're going to have a lot of young, talented players. And one caveat to add, in a normal year, Ohio State would have played, they went to the national game, they would have played 15 games. They would have probably had 7, 8, 9 blowouts. That means the second stringers, the third stringers got in, they got game reps. So kids that are redshirt freshmen, true freshmen would have gotten those game reps, which would have helped them for the next year. Because of COVID, and because of the cancellations of Ohio State, they only played 8 games, which is pretty much half the amount of games that they'd normally play. They also did not have that many blowouts. They only had like 2 or 3 blowouts. So the players that, like, really good guys, I know guys in the roster like G. Scott and Julian Fleming and can't think of a couple others off the hand. They normally would have played. They didn't get to play much. They really didn't get any reps because they just wasn't the games. There wasn't the opportunities. That might affect the transition. Now, I mentioned receivers, and they're bringing back a lot of good receivers. So I don't know. But the backup quarterbacks didn't get much backup time. I think C.J. Stroud might have gotten in a couple of games, but he didn't get much. The O-line replacing some. I don't know how much of backup O-line, but I don't think they got a ton. I think they did – a game that they would have was Michigan State because of the COVID and Northwestern because they had guys out with COVID. But for the most part, I don't think they got quite as much as you would like. So there could be some learning curves. They play Oregon, second game of the season. And I tell you what, I'm probably not going to pick Oregon. I'm going to pick Ohio State, to be fair, because it's in Ohio State and it's a very tough team. But if that game was in Oregon, if you would have switched, like this year, Ohio State was going to Oregon. I was going to pick Ohio State because I just thought Oregon still had a new quarterback and Ohio State was having Justin Fields and all that talent they're bringing in. I had Ohio State being in preseason my number 1. Oregon was getting pretty good hype. They're going to be a top 10 team. I just thought even at Alton, which is extremely difficult, one of the more difficult places to play. I think they've only lost 1 time under Mario Cristobal in 3 years. And it's difficult to beat them. And I still think Ohio State was going to beat them. If you switched years and maybe, who knows, you never know what the schedule is. It's so weird and we still have COVID in the air. Maybe they decided to play in Alton. I don't know. If that was the case, I would pick Oregon to win. If that game was in Austin, because I think new quarterback, new offensive line, a lot of new defensive players, I think I think Oregon brings back Oregon. So since I'm talking about last night, Oregon brings back 97% of its production on offense. Their offense was number 20 in offensive efficiency in the country. They were the second best offense as far as efficiency, total efficiency, meaning yards per play, yards, rushing, pass, all that. There is some question marks at the quarterback position, but as long as they can get it ironed out, they're going to bring back some experienced guys. They just were a little inconsistent towards the end of the year, mainly Tyler Shuck, the quarterback. But a lot of experience at the skill position, wide receiver, running back. They bring back everyone. Offensive line, they bring back everyone. So they actually bring back a lot more production than Ohio State. And Oregon's going to have a top 10 roster as far as baseline talent, too. So talent roster with more production at home against a team that probably will have more baseline talent, but less production, less experience on the road. New quarterback, I would take Oregon this upcoming year, but that's not it's not the case going to Ohio State. I just think that home field advantage, it's a tough place to play. I just don't think I'm going to pick Oregon. I think it's going to be a pretty good game, though. I think it's going to be a decent game because of all the things I outlined. I just think Ohio State figures out a way to win at home. But anyways, who else in the Big Ten? Stay in the Big Ten. Well, Michigan, they had a terrible year, 2-4. They return. I would have to look at the roster a little bit more. I actually think they returned most of their people on both sides of the ball. Obviously, they have a new defensive coordinator. The quarterback position, who knows what's going to happen with that? That's kind of up in the air. Cade McNamara, is it Joe Milton? Is it J.J. McCarthy, the 5-star, comes in? I think that he's going to have a legitimate chance at that. They have recruited pretty well. They have some pretty dynamic wide receivers. They did have one of their top running backs, Zach Carbonate, enter the transfer portal today. That's another thing with Michigan currently. They are having a lot of guys enter the portal. They've just had some attrition problems. Obviously, the normal early draft entries. They had not a great recruiting class a couple of years ago that I think hurt them a little bit. Their talent has just been not up to par at the first few years with Harbaugh. First few years, so they've gone by a 2.7 team talent composite. The first several years, he had a top 10 roster at Michigan. Last year, according to my formula and the composite, Michigan was about 17. I haven't done my formula yet, but I think they're going to be somewhere around there, 15, 16, 17 this year. It's still a good roster, but not quite definitely not the talent level he was bringing in. It's definitely taken a step back. So Harbaugh is going to have to figure out a way, especially playing against Ohio State. And they just need a better year next year. They just were not a very good team this year. Had trouble stopping it. Obviously, they had trouble in defensive backfield. They had really difficulty giving up big plays. We'll see. I would say Michigan is a team that will – I don't know. I would have to look more at the roster. They had too many questions. Penn State actually brings back most of the production. But once again – a team that obviously started off bad. They got better as the year came on. They've lost a lot of their better players, opted out, like a Micah Parsons and Pat Freiermuth. They had a guy like a Shaka Toney go to the NFL. Trying to think of another guy that had head off to the end. Jerry Brown ended up having to medical retire. They have lost several decent players to the portal. This year's class was not up to par. It was outside the top 20. Last year wasn't bad, but maybe not as good as the one a couple of years ago. I think their talent level is taking a dip. They were up there near the top 10. They had some opt-outs. I think they fell out. I think they ended up like 11 or 12 in my team talent formula. This year, they're probably going to be more like in the 15, 16 range. So they're another team that I think is taking a little bit of step back when it comes to talent, kind of like Michigan. I think Michigan and Penn State had really had some galvanizing classes and brought in some really talented players, guys like Micah Parsons, Justin Shorter. Actually, didn't really end up working out, left out Florida. But they brought in some really good guys, I would say as a whole, a lot of those guys have now left, and they have not necessarily replaced them with equal talent. So Penn State's someone I'd have to look at more. I'd have to look at their efficiency, but I think they maybe take a little bit of a step back. I have trouble. So I say step back, and you're like, well, Michigan was 2-4. Penn State was 4-5. You take a step. No, I mean what they've been at. Like Penn State had been at a pretty consistent 11-2. They won a Big Ten championship. They went to the Fiesta Bowl. They went to the Cotton Bowl. They had been at that level. The weird year screwed up. I don't think they go back to that level. I think they're more like an 8-4 team. I have to look deeper at the numbers. Same with Michigan. Michigan was like 10-3 and played Peach Bowl and the Citrus Bowl, and I maybe get back to that 9. I maybe like Michigan's team a little better than Penn State if they can get that quarterback position. Just maybe I like it a little bit better, but I have to look a little deeper at the numbers to come to that conclusion. Just there's a possibility. So I haven't looked at it enough. The rest of the teams, I haven't looked enough at the other teams. Indiana obviously had a great year. They're returning a guy like Jack Tuttle, Michael Penix, if he can be ready in time after his ACL. I believe they returned back most of the receiver talent. There is a ceiling, and it's not that high for Indiana. And they had a good year this year, but you saw they lost Ole Miss in the bowl game, and Ole Miss was an average SEC team. So there is a ceiling with Indiana just based upon the talent they bring in. But they had a very good year. Now the West, Wisconsin's a team that obviously underachieved this year, and in all the COVID issues that happened, and they did not live up to expectations. They're a team bringing back a quarterback. They have some really talented offensive linemen. They bring back the running back, Jalen Berger guy. They bring back most of their defensive players. They will be better next year. Wisconsin's a team that I can consistently say they rebound pretty good. I think they have a good enough team, and they have good enough players. I don't have to even look deep enough in numbers to know that they are better than what they were this year. They also are going to have, I haven't finished formula, but they're going to have a top 25 roster this year. Wisconsin's never had it in the team talent composite era, 6 years since its inception. They've never had a top 25 roster. Their rosters have been in the 30 to 40 range. They recruited pretty good. They had a top 25 class last year, a top 20 class this year. They've signed a 5-star in back-to-back classes. I mean, they've done this with 3-star offensive linemen. They actually going to have 2 5-star offensive linemen and another 4-star offensive lineman. Top 100, 3 different top 100 guys. I think Graham Mertz will be better. He showed good early in the season, showed some inconsistency later, showed better at the end at the bowl game. Broke the old Mayo Trophy. Wisconsin will be better. That's a team I feel pretty confident saying they're going to bounce back and they're going to have a pretty decent season. Got to look at the schedule, see how exactly it plays out. Nebraska is just the biggest anomaly to me. They have had they're going to probably again in 3 years of Dunbar formula, they're going to have the best roster in the Big Ten West. Same composite would say the same thing. Nebraska's had the best roster in the West year in, year out. They've only had 1 winning season in 6 years. 0 winning seasons in the 3 years of Scott Frost. He signed top 20 class this year, top 20 last year, top 20 the year before. His initial class was top 25. He's had terrible attrition. He's had guys that are Wandale Robinson, their best running back slot guy, transferred out, left to Kentucky. J.D. Spielman, who was the best receiver the year before, left to TCU. Some defensive recruits that were consensus 4-star blue chip guys headed out. Henry Gray, big kid that got out of Florida, transferred out immediately. I think it's Keyshawn Johnson out of Miami, transferred out immediately. Julian Fleming, a wide receiver, transferred out. Blue chip wide receiver, transferred out immediately. He's just had a lot of not just attrition, but he's lost guys that were high recruits, productive players. Leave. Reese Washington got kicked off the team. I mean, it's been like this vicious cycle of attrition and not living up to expectation and inconsistent play. The offense 1 week will look good, the defense will look bad, and the next week vice versa. They're just not a consistent team. I don't know. they're going to probably have the best roster for the third straight year my formula, and I would not pick them. I think Iowa will be pretty good. They bring enough good players back. They're always pretty consistent. Northwestern haven't looked at them enough. They had a good year. But remember, Northwestern's a team that can win the West, be 1-11, win the West, and they took advantage of a bad year in the West Division overall. Don't really have much more to say about the Big Ten. I'm going to look more at the numbers, see who has the most returning production, look at some of the efficiency, see how efficient the production is coming back. But offhand, you have to take Ohio State just based upon pure talent and just how they've dominated the East for so many years. And you probably have to take them for the title. But Wisconsin's the dark horse. They're going to be better. They return a lot. They're recruiting better. They always rebound off of maybe like a little bit of an off season. Wisconsin will be better next year. They will be better. And I feel pretty confident about that. They'd be my number 2 team as of right now. I think they could win 10-plus games. Pac-12. What's up? What's up, Pac-12? You always get so much love. The media just rips on you. Oh, man. They did not look good in the bowls. Oregon was not was not good. I think I talked about that in my previous podcast. It was just not a good performance. Specifically, Oregon, what to look for. Oregon's recruited extremely well. 4 years under Mario Cristobal, 2 top 15 and 2 top 10 classes. He still can finish off. I don't think he's going to get a top 5. I think he's going to end up in the top 6 or 7 or 8, 6 to 8 range. I think they probably will end up with the 3rd straight year of the top class in the Pac-12. The good news, like I said, they returned 97% of their production on offense. When I add the production, passing touchdowns, receiving yards, receiving touchdowns, rushing attempts, rushing touchdown, rushing yards, 97% of their production. They returned, I believe, 10 of 11 starters on offense. That's great. And this was the number 21 offense. This is, for the first 4 games of the season, this offense looked really good. The last 3 games, they did not look as good. They scored 17 against Cal, 31 against USC, but it wasn't one touchdown like a defensive touchdown. No, it wasn't. But it was like short field kind of stuff. And then they had 17 against Iowa State. But as a whole, when they played the 3 best defense, they just made mistakes, turned the ball over too much. And that's the problem. The one question is the quarterback. Tyler Shuck was just inconsistent. Did some good things early in the year, still made mistakes. Then later in the year, he kept on making mistakes, wasn't even doing really any good things. Anthony Brown came in. I thought he looked pretty good, but he was not the starter. He got beaten out. So who knows? That's the question. But bring back all the top receivers, bring back probably 2 of the top returning rushers in the Pac-12, return an offensive line. It was their first year. But several of them made all-conference first, second, or honorable mention. I think 3 or 4 of the 5 starters did. So there is enough, and there's talented guys. There's talented recruits they're bringing in, talented recruits that wide receiver they're bringing in. Overall, the offense is returning a lot of production. They recruited very well. On that side of the ball, basically, it was dominant in this year's recruiting class. Oregon on offense, I feel pretty darn confident right now it's going to be a pretty good team. I trust Joe Moorhead. I think that they had second most efficient offense in the Pac-12 this year. I think SP Plus had them as the number 1 offense in the Pac-12. I know when it goes to other metrics like total yards are in the top 3, scoring they're in the top 3. So I think as long as they can get good play out of the quarterback position, not great play, they could have top offense in college football. But as long as they have good play, I think they're the number 1 offense in the Pac-12. Defensively, we'll start off with the good. They return 78% of the production. Once again, production, how I do it is tackles, sacks, passes defended, interceptions, forced fumbles, fumble recoveries. That's how I did it. They returned 78% of that production. They returned 7 of 11 starters. They returned probably one of the best edge guys, not just the Pac-12, but in the country, in Kayvon Thibodeau. They've returned freshman All-American Noah Sewell, former 5-star. They returned all Pac-12 cornerback Mikael Wright, and also all Pac-12 nickelback Jamal Hill. So those 4 players, good. They had other guys that started. They have other guys that are coming in. I think there is some question marks. Question mark of how good is the rest of the D-line. Good question mark about the other guys that play in the linebacker position. They weren't great this year. Safety position wasn't great. Guys going to step up. They're going to bring in someone new that they lost their defensive coordinator, Andy Avalos, he took a starting job at, took a head coaching job at Boise State, new defensive coordinator. And the defense, I think they ended up 33rd in efficiency. It was like 6th best in the Pac-12. I think they were bottom half of the conference in rush defense. They did not cause a ton of havoc plays, sacks and quarterback hurries and tackles for loss. They were like 7th or 8th in the conference. I'd have to look at the numbers a little closer. But overall, the defense was just not great. They had good games, played good against USC, played good in the second half against Iowa State, but they had bad games. UCLA ran for 200-plus yards on them. Oregon State ran for 200-plus. Oregon State scored 38 points on them. 400-plus yards they gave up to Washington State. Same to Stanford. In games like against UCLA and Stanford, they're playing against backup quarterbacks. I didn't think the defense looked great this year. I just didn't think it was a great performance. I thought they didn't consistently get after the quarterback. I didn't think they consistently stopped the run. I think their overall drive efficiency, I think, was like 51 in college football. They just gave up long drives. They didn't get off the field. Their third down efficiency was not great on defense. They didn't force enough turnovers. They were literally -9 in the turnover department. And I think it was only 2 different games they even forced turnovers in. And the other 5 games, they didn't force 1 turnover. So overall, I just was not that impressed. They lose their defensive coordinator. They actually lose more production on that side of the ball. They recruited good last year. 5-star Justin Flo was injured. 5-star Dante Manning was injured. Steve Stevens, a former 4-star, who was a guy that was going to come in and compete, he was injured most years. So they had 3 guys that probably would have been productive even as just true freshmen and sophomore, but were injured, and that made it where they had to play a couple walk-ons and probably some not ideal positions. And then a lot of the guys on defense are going to be older. There's going to be, like Oregon, the big thing with them was they had 21% of the roster was upperclassmen. There's 79% of the scholarship athletes on the team. Roster, there's a different number. But of the scholarship guys, 85 scholarship guys on the team, 21% were upperclassmen. I think it was one of the youngest rosters in college football. Well, a lot of those guys that they're going to get a bump up. I think next year they're going to be 30+%, like 30, 35. More normal, more towards the mean of what a normal roster is of scholarship athletes, upperclassmen to underclassmen ratio. And I think a lot of those guys that are going to be older, because I looked at the 2 deep, I was doing a 2 deep with the defense, and the defense is going to be older next year, like a lot of juniors, a couple seniors, sophomores. So it's going to be a more experienced unit. That's a plus. They do bring back production, but they have to be better next year. Hopefully a full off season, just get a new system, getting the ground running. The defense does need to play better than it was this year. The offense, the only question is quarterback. Outside of quarterback, between the play calling, the production you're bringing back, and the overall talent I know they have in the roster over there, I have pretty good faith that the offense is going to be pretty good next year. I think it's going to be a pretty dynamic offense. I think they're going to score quite a few points. And if they can get really good play out of the quarterback position, it straight up will be one of the better offenses in the country. I'm a little worried about the defense. A little more worried. Who else in the Pac-12? Washington returns a lot. Washington returns pretty much all their starters. They only played 4 games, but Washington actually returns. Pro Football Focus did the top performers per position. They did like the 8 top performers per each position. So like 8 quarterbacks, 8 running backs, 8 wide receivers, 8 tight ends. So go down the stream. Washington actually had the most. Oregon was second. Washington had the most top performers on a per play basis. They returned back some very good offensive linemen. I think they're going to have the best offensive line. They have a very good rusher in ZTF on defense. Ufusu was the highest graded any defensive player. He plays linebacker. Ufusini, I think his name is, highest graded linebacker in the Pac-12. Trent McDuffie's a really good player. He's an all Pac-12 corner. Kyler Murray is a great athlete. He plays a safety kind of nickel position. I think they're going to be pretty good next year. I would question their offense. I didn't think looked great. I didn't see a ton out of the quarterback position. The wide receiver position has not really given much the last couple of years. And I think there's a little bit of a limit to the running back, but they return everyone. So everyone returns. They only played in 4 games, but they return everyone, and they bring back a lot of production. I think Washington will be pretty good. I think they'll be pretty good. Great? No. But pretty good, yes. Stanford loses a lot, and I'm going to do a deep dive into everyone, but they lose their quarterback. They lose their best 2 best pass catchers. They lose a couple of key defensive players. They lose 2 of their best offensive linemen, all Pac-12, Drew Dahlman, Foster Sorrell, quarterback, like I said, Davis Mills, Simi Fioco, who was possibly the best wide receiver in the conference. He left. So they are losing just a lot. They haven't recruited great. They have had a top 25 roster every year, and normally the roster has fallen in the top 20. This year, they might be barely inside the top 25. They might be like 25. Their roster's kind of going down. The guys who are better are going to be a lot of underclassmen. I think they're going to be playing probably more than you would like. Guys from like last year's class, like redshirt freshmen, some sophomores. I don't think it's. I think Charles going to have a little bit of a job in his hand. They were not bad this year, and they lost that first game to Oregon. They didn't have Davis Mills, but they went on. They were 4-1. Had a close loss to Colorado, won the rest of their games, and I thought they looked like a pretty decent team. One of the better-looking teams in the Pac-12. I don't think they're going to be very good next year. As far as then who else in the Washington State returns a lot. They only played 4 games. They didn't look great, but they return a lot. We'll see. Oregon State loses some good guys. Johnson, running back, was possibly the best running back in the Pac-12. He's gone. But they return the quarterback. I'd have to look at the production more. They don't have a lot of talent, but they return a decent amount of players, return some good offensive linemen. What am I missing on? Cal. Cal, I think, lost a couple guys, and they're another team that only played 4 games. Their overall roster talent's going to be there's a little bit of a dearth there. Also, when the top performers per Pro Football Focus returning, they were second least amount returning of top performers. A little bit of a talent dearth over there. Have a pretty good top 25 recruiting class this year, but as a whole, I think it's going to be a little bit of a struggle for Cal. Didn't get a ton of reps. Didn't look great when they played. Lost some key guys. A guy like Cam Byron. Bynum on defense and stuff. So I expect a little bit of a drop off with them. When you go to the other side, now USC is getting a lot of love when it comes to some of the way too early. I see them, a lot of them, they're the number 1 Pac-12 team. It's usually them or Oregon, Washington flipped in there a little bit. I think USC is being a little overrated. I think USC loses some pretty good players. They lost their best offensive tackle, one of the best tackles in college football, actually, and the best one in the Pac-12, Elijah Vera Tucker. There was 2 of the best wide receivers in the Pac-12, on Ross St. Brown and Tyler Vaughns. They lose Marquis Stepp, one of the best running backs, went to the transfer portal. On defense, they lose all Pac-12 defensive lineman Marlon Tuapulupu. Poi Gaetu, who's a former 5-star, went to the portal. Talanoa Hufanga, the Pac-12 Player of the Year, All-American. He headed to the NFL. Elijah Griffin, one of their best corners. I think they lose quite a bit. I don't know exactly how much they bring back, but they maybe bring back 6 or so guys. They do bring back Keaton Slovis, who was pretty inconsistent this year. I was not that impressed with his sophomore year. They bring back some great receivers, Drake London, Brew McCoy, but then they have some offensive line. Their offensive line as a whole didn't look great. They lost their best offensive lineman, so that has to be worrisome. Their defensive line wasn't great, and they lost their best defensive lineman. Their defensive backfield looked pretty good, but they lost their best guy. So USC is a team that I would definitely keep your eye on as possibly being someone. If they all of a sudden finish 6-6, wouldn't shock me, and that could be the end of Clay Helton. He's been on the hot seat every year. The fan base have wanted him out. He's on the hot seat, and I think it could be. Who could I pick coming out of the soft? Arizona State returns quite a bit. They only played 4 games this year. They didn't look bad. And actually, if you go for an overall efficiency, they were pretty good. They should have won the USC game. The UCLA game was a close game. And they returned pretty much everyone. Got a lot of guys that would have been seniors decided to come back. They only played 4 games. I would come back too. 4 games is just not enough. 6, 7, 8, I can see. 4 games, that's not enough. 4 or 5 games. Utah will be good. Now, Utah, the tragedy of Ty Jordan dying. Also, their starting quarterback, Cam Rising, got injured the first game of the season. Then the backup, Jake Bentley, didn't play well. He transferred out. So they have to replace the quarterback. They have to replace the running back. And so their offense, once again, probably will have to kind of take a step back because of that. And any movement they made forwards might not be as good. But defensively, they got better as the year went on. I think the defense will be pretty good next year. Kyle Winning, well, it's good defense. Morgan Scalley is one of the better defensive coordinators. I think Utah will be better. And UCLA brings back Dorian Thompson-Robinson. His flaws and all, he still's a dynamic player. Britton Brown, the backup running back, comes back. He was a guy that was a good 1-2 punch with Demetric Felton. They bring back some of the better offensive linemen. They bring back enough good defensive players. I could see the South being interesting. Off the top of my head, I'd take Arizona State. I think the returning Jaden Daniels, returning enough skill talent, and returning some key players on the defense that I thought looked pretty good in those 4 games. I think they're a 9-10 win team, possibly. Not a very hard schedule. I'd probably say 9. But I could see them being a 9-3 big Pac-12 South champion and playing a team like Oregon for the title. But I would say Oregon and Washington. If I had to say who do I think the 2 best teams, I think it would be Oregon and Washington. Oregon has the number 1 best baseline talent. They're going to have the most talented roster. They're also bringing back a lot of production. Like I said, 97% on offense, 78% on defense. I would have to add all some numbers together, but overall, they're returning a good portion, like 10 stars in offense, 17 of 22 starters, and then Washington, even more starters, even more of their production they bring back. I lean Oregon. Oregon has a little more talented roster. I think also Oregon has the ability just to put up more points on offense. I don't trust Washington as well. I do trust Washington's defense a little more. I thought they were overall a little better this year, and I think that they've recruited very well on that side of the ball. They're not losing their defensive coordinator. Oregon did, so I trust that. But I think they could score a few more points. I think they can get them. But that's my kind of initial take. Team talent formula, dropping it out. I've done some rough drafts. I kind of got an idea of who's going to be up and who's going to be down across college football. I talk about the Big Ten. I talk about the Pac-12. So I'm going to specifically talk about them. I think the Big Ten and the Pac-12 are actually going to be pretty well represented in the top 25. I think there's going to be actually 5 teams in both conferences, which is a step up. So actually both conferences are, from a baseline perspective, I think are going to get a little stronger. Wisconsin's going to be in the top 25 this year. They haven't been. I believe UCLA. They've done very good in the portal. They've added several blue chip guys. They're also the favorite to land Zach Charbonnet, who is a former top 50 guy from Michigan. If they land him, they're going to have landed like 4 blue chip guys in the portal. They also are borderline top 25 class right now. Wisconsin, like I said, have done really well the last 2 cycles. So those 2 rosters are better. Then you got like Oregon, USC. Oregon's going to be the only top 10 team, but that's something to talk about. Oregon's going to have their best roster from a talent perspective ever. The team talent composite era, they have never had a top 10 roster. Actually, most of the rosters this last season, they were top 15. Most of the rosters were outside the top 15. But Mario Cristobal remarkably turned that roster around, a roster that was 25th his first year, 17th his second year, 12th according to the composite his third year. It will probably be a top 10 roster this year. I'd probably say in the 8 to 9 range. So just a remarkable transformation. They have gotten a lot better. And that's why they haven't gotten the love Oregon that they did last year or even the year before, going into Herbert's senior year or even after the Rose Bowl appearance. They were a top 10 team. COVID happened. They ended up being a little outside, but they were most early polls. They were a top 10 team. The Herbert year, they were just 11. They're just outside the top 10. This year, they're probably going to be like a 15. That's kind of what I'm getting the vibe, and probably when it all boils down, they're probably rated about 15. But I actually think this team, if they can get the quarterback position right, the experience they're bringing back, the talent on the roster, I think that this could be the team that actually is the best team under Mario Cristobal. And they play Ohio State, and that's tough, but they have the talent. They have the people with good quarterback play. You have to have good quarterback play. Subpar quarterback play can lose you several games. The quarterback position is just, I mean, the NFL is everything. College football, it's becoming, I mean, you look at all the national champions. So let's go through them. Let's go through 7 national title games. Cardinal Jones is the one outlier. That was an outlier. But you go, oh, sorry, Jake Croker. Okay, I didn't think of that. But the national title game, Deshaun Watson, that wasn't even a top 10 roster. He was a Heisman finalist. He did the game. Then the next year, it was Deshaun Watson, Heisman finalist, wins the title game. Then the next year, Tua Tagovailoa, who ended up being a Heisman finalist and one of the most prolific college football quarterbacks of all time. Then the next year, Trevor Lawrence, he's been the number 1 pick in the draft. Then the next year, Joe Burrow, Heisman Trophy winner, number 1 pick in the draft. Then the next year, Mac Jones, Heisman finalist, he's going to be first round pick. So, like, you, for the most part, you have to have really good quarterback player. You can have an outlier here and there where you have a team like Ohio State do what they do, and they got hot, and Ezekiel Elliott was playing amazing. They still had top 5 roster. I mean, they had NFL guys all over on offense, defense. So, I mean, maybe Cardinal Jones was a little overrated, but the rest of the team wasn't. And then same with Alabama. Okay, maybe Jake Croker wasn't, but that was the number 1 roster in college football that year. I mean, some of the guys that are all pro guys in the NFL right now playing that. So if it's possible if you're that good, but right now you look at Georgia. Georgia has had a top 5 roster every single year. Why have they lost? They haven't had great quarterback play. Jake Fromm was just not great. And then they got Stinson Bennett. They got JT Daniels in. They won their last 5 games. And when they go into next year, if JT Daniels can continue that, Georgia's a team that could all of a sudden win the national title next year. Yeah, they have talent. Yeah. So it's just important. It's just so important to have it. So, but if you're in a top 10 roster and you play in a conference that's not as hard like the Pac-12, they don't necessarily need, if Tyler Shuck even played take away a little bit of the turnovers, but the first 4 games of the season, off the top of my head, he had 10 touchdowns, he had passing, 3 running, and they were averaging 35 plus points a game. He was playing good enough. The last 3 games, you can't play like that. Take away a turnover or 2, the first 4 games, I would take that Tyler Shuck. And if that Tyler Shuck comes into next year and plays like he did the first 4 games, that's good. Oh, yeah. Oregon is plenty enough to about the only game that you would need him to play better than that is Ohio State. The rest of the games, they can win with that. They're just not that great teams. Like I went through and told you, I talked to these solid teams. There's some good pieces. There's some good returning production. The good thing I'll say about the Pac-12 is a lot of players returned. A lot of even guys that had the extra year of eligibility return. So there is not a lot of teams that are not returning a significant amount of starters. Well, Stanford and USC are probably 2 of the teams that have lost the most starting production and overall offense, defensive production. And I have to look into it deeper. But other than those 2 teams, the rest of the teams, I mean, like I said, Washington State, I mean, Arizona State, those teams are returning damn near all their production. Even Oregon's returning most of its production, most of its starters. So it's just, the teams are very good. They might be better next year. I could see the Pac-12 having like 4 teams. I actually probably, because they're having more upperclassmen returning, because there's guys with more experience, I actually have a little more optimism with the Pac-12. I actually think the Big Ten is the one that I'm looking at, and I'm like, they might be taking a little bit of a step back. I think Penn State is taking a little step back. I think Michigan, I'm just looking at their overall talent level, slight step back. I really like the programs at Iowa and Northwestern, so they always can have good seasons. We can't trust Nebraska. So I trust Wisconsin coming back. But there's a possibility there's only one 10-win team, and that's Ohio State. There's a possibility that happens. And Pac-12, like I said, possibly Arizona State wins 10. Possibly, I mean, you all of a sudden get Arizona State, Washington, Oregon. You get 3 teams with 10 wins. From how maligned the Pac-12 has been, maybe you get 1, 2 in the national game. In the New Year's 6. Maybe you sneak a team like Oregon in. They have a close loss to Ohio State and run the table. They will get in. They'll get in the playoff. They get blown out by Ohio State. That could be problematic. If they lose like 35-24 and then win the rest of their games, they'll get in the playoff. Yeah. I have a little more trust in the Pac-12. Actually takes a little step forwards because I think the rosters are a little better. I think the rosters are a little more experienced. I think there's more production coming back, and I think that all has to be accounted for. Penn State, Penn State. The Big Ten, from my initial thought and from what once again, I have to look deeper, I just don't think as much production, as much experience is coming back. Like a lot of the good players, they exited. They went to the NFL. They have higher draft grades for Big Ten, for Penn State, for Michigan, for Ohio State. I mean, the Big Ten in general, off the top of my head, there's probably going to be 5-6 guys drafted in the first round. Whereas the Pac-12 might have 1. Maybe 2, maybe 1, maybe 2. Penei Sewell. Could see maybe Elijah Vera Tucker getting in there. Whereas the Big Ten, Justin Fields will be a first-round pick. Wyatt Davis will be a first-round pick. I could see Nate Myers getting in the first round. I could see Jalen Mayfield from Michigan getting in the first round. Micah Parsons will be in the first round. I believe there's a possibility Pat Freiermuth could get in the first round. I wouldn't completely sleep on Shaka Toney, possibly. Definitely an early day too. So, I mean, there's just a lot more guys, and those guys all went to the NFL. But there's been a little bit of a recruiting drop-off for some of the better teams like Penn State and Michigan, and the better players left to the draft. And so there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. And also there's staff changes. So I just think there could be a drop-off outside of Ohio State. And all of a sudden, Oregon upsets Ohio State, and Ohio State then has to run the table because they lose another game in a conference that might be not quite as good. Maybe the Big Ten's not represented next year. Yeah, I've read it somewhere else. I think it was on the Cover 3 podcast. And they said, yeah, the Big Ten, there's someone maybe to watch the little digression moving forward, where you have this kind of reciprocal nature of college football. And whereas like the Big 12, I think Oklahoma's going to be good. I think Iowa State's going to be good. I think Texas even has the talent to possibly rebound and be pretty good. Big 12 could be up a little bit. ACC has Clemson and North Carolina. I think North Carolina's a little overrated, but they bring back Sam Howell, one of the better quarterbacks in college football. Plays at an elite level. They could be pretty good. Boston College. You could just see it's a reciprocal. The Pac-12 has been down. They're the one everyone's kicking on, and they did not have good teams this year. There was no one good in the Pac-12. Let's be honest. But I could see next year where there's 2 or 3 pretty good teams. Whereas the Big Ten, maybe there's only 1 or 2 good teams. So college football is reciprocal. It's changing. It's fluid. Anyways, that is tonight's podcast. Next week, maybe we'll get a guest on. Pac-12, Big Ten. I don't know. See. Anyways, guys, check out the podcast on iTunes. Give it a like. Give me a review. Say, hey, I hate what you do. Say, I love what you do. You're the best, man. All right. Have a good night.